Hi everyone, and welcome to our Medicare Awareness Session featuring our friend Bryan Gay, owner of Boomer Insurance Group. We're super excited to have you here today. We've had many conversations with you over the years about the importance of planning for Medicare, either before, during, or I guess there is no after. But there are a lot of things we're going to talk about today that I think you'll find very useful as you plan for medical expenses in retirement. I'm going to have Stephen Fletcher talk to you a little bit more about that, and then we'll let Bryan say a few words. Stephen?
So here at EVO, we are financial planning professionals, which means that we know just enough to be dangerous in all of the areas related to finance. But when it comes to the intricacies of getting people signed up for Medicare and making sure they know everything that they need to know, we'd rather bring in the professionals, which is why today we have Bryan Gay.
Well, thank you guys again for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's nice that you guys take the time out of your day to invest into your clients and your friends and families. So thank you so much for having me, and we're really excited for you to learn quite a bit about Medicare. Hopefully you find it valuable and you appreciate having good advice. Thanks.
And you'll find Bryan's presentation is very engaging, and if you have any questions, certainly reach out to us or Bryan afterward. I do have to say before we finish that Bryan is not even standing up straight. He's a super tall individual. I'd like Bryan to stand up straight. There we go. Anyway, hope you enjoy the presentation.
All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Medicare and the wonderful, wacky world about enrolling and the plans that you need or plans that you may not need, and all along the side of Medicare. Well, my name is Bryan Gay. I'm the owner of a company called Boomer Insurance Group. We're a very niche market insurance agency that only deals with Medicare insurance. So we don't do car insurance, we don't do life insurance. If people need help with those, they got to go somewhere else. We're only able to help people understand the intricacies of Medicare. So this is now going on my 21st year of helping people with Medicare insurance. So if anybody ever has any questions, they're more than welcome to give us a call, and we'd be happy to help. So as I go through the presentation, you're going to hear a lot of probably bad grammar, maybe not the best English. So full disclosure, I'm originally from Oklahoma. So if I use some bad grammar, it's probably because I'm from Oklahoma. But what we're going to talk today is about what the publicly available plans are with Medicare. Here's what we're not going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about other health insurance that certain people are allowed to have that others are not allowed to have. Here's what I mean by that. So we're not going to talk about military benefits. So if somebody worked in the military for 20 plus years, they get a program called TRICARE for Life. So we're not going to talk about TRICARE for Life. There's some people who work for the federal government. They have federal employees' health benefits. We're not going to talk about the federal program either. They get a totally separate system if they would like to choose that system. We're not going to talk about large corporations like Coca-Cola or Philip Morris International or Disney insurances, that they offer insurance to their retirees. That's not available to everybody. So we're going to talk about plans and the programs around Medicare that are available anywhere around the United States. Now, while Medicare is national, there are a little bit of intricacies when it comes to certain states. Few states have enacted their own rules around how some of these different options play into each other. So if you have questions about your own specific state, I would be able to help with that. You can call me. Or what we're going to talk about today is mostly on the East Coast. So primarily Virginia, some North Carolina, Maryland, Florida, that kind of thing. But the topics that we'll talk about are across the board with Medicare. So without further ado, let's talk about getting into Medicare. So this is what's very confusing to people, is people start getting told that they have to enroll into Medicare at age 65. And not everybody needs to enroll into Medicare at age 65. If you ever heard of that saying, kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't, well, that's how Medicare works. You're darned if you don't sign up for Medicare when you should have signed up for Medicare, because if you don't do what you were supposed to do with Medicare, well, then you get penalized financially every month the rest of your life when you actually do what you should have done to begin with. So you're kind of darned if you don't. But then sometimes you're darned if you do. If you do sign up for Medicare when you were not supposed to sign up for Medicare at age 65, you're darned if you do, because you actually get penalized from the IRS if you do sign up for Medicare when you should have not signed up for Medicare at age 65. So before you go enrolling into Medicare, make sure you deal with an expert and make sure you're getting the right information for you specifically. Not a coworker did, not a sister did, not a brother, not a friend. You need to do what you need to do, all right? So I'm gonna be clicking on this little computer as we go through the slides. So at the end of the day, you only get 2 options of choices for plans. When you're coming into Medicare, you're gonna need to either choose option number 1 or option number 2. These are your choices. Now, if you're approaching the age of 65, or if you're over the age of 65, you're gonna get bombarded with all of these mailers and phone calls and emails and sometimes text messages, and gosh knows what's going on. All right, so everybody's just trying to sell you their version of option 1 or option 2. It's not so much the company that's important as the option you decide to choose. I'll give you an example of that. Humana, which is a pretty big company, they sell option 1 and Humana sells option 2. But so does Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Blue Cross and Blue Shield sells option 2. Blue Cross and Blue Shield sells option 1. AARP, which is United Healthcare, they sell option 1 and option 2. Don't think about the companies, think about which option it is that you choose. Now, as we go through this, I have a bunch of analogies to help people remember the difference between option 1 and option 2. Because even your friends who bought their Medicare plans, they don't even know what they have. Trust me, I've been doing this a few days, and they will tell their friends things that aren't true. They don't mean to tell their friends things that aren't true about Medicare. They were just confused when they bought their own plan. So I give analogies which help people remember it a little bit better. There's not a right way or a wrong way. Option 1 and option 2. So without further ado, we're going to get into the first option. Now, what I would suggest you do if you were doing reading this or learning about this or watching this at home, I would have you write down everything that shows up on this slide and this screen. So option number 1. Well, I tell people option number 1 is like having your own car. Here comes the first of a lot of terrible analogies, but here it comes. So option number 1 is exactly like having your own car. Well, if you have your own car, you get to go wherever you want to go. So you can go to the doctors you want to go to, the hospitals you want to go to. You don't need referrals. You don't need permission slips. It's very simple, but it's more expensive. So typically, if you choose option number 1, it's going to be more expensive. So option 1 is designed for freedom and flexibility, but it's not really designed to save most people any money. Sometimes it does, but most times it would not. But now, if you chose option number 1, well, it's kind of a package deal. You're going to need 3 ID cards. So on your page and on the screen, if you wanted to write down 3 ID cards, well, you would need 3 ID cards, and the first ID card would be Medicare. Now, Medicare has 2 parts. It has Part A, like apple, and Part B, like banana. All right? Well, Part A is insurance you have actually prepaid for your entire working life. It's been coming out of all of your payroll paychecks. So when you go to retire and then you start using Medicare Part A, typically you don't have to pay anything for it, as long as you've worked for 10 years, which the majority of everybody has worked more than 10 years of their life. Now, Part A insurance covers inpatient medical care like hospitalizations or inpatient rehab and things like that. All right, so you don't have to pay anything for Part A as long as you've worked for 10 years. It'll cover things at the hospital, basically. And then there's Part B, as in banana. Part B is separate insurance, and Part B you have not prepaid for. So you would have to start paying for Part B. Now with Part B insurance, it's outpatient medical care. Things like outpatient physical therapy, going to the doctors, going to a specialist, having blood work done, even going to physical therapy or an ambulance ride is technically outpatient. The emergency room is also outpatient. So all of those medical claims that would be billed as outpatient fall under Part B. But when you have Part A and Part B, you have Medicare. So when I refer to the word Medicare, I'm referring to A and B combined together. Now, Medicare is only available through the federal government. That's it. Uncle Sam, basically. A lot of people think they're going to get their Medicare at an insurance company. You have to get Medicare first. You have to get Medicare Part A and Part B when you need to get it. So let's talk about Medicare as being your primary insurance. So you got to pay for it. And currently, because this is the year 2022, I know some of these videos have some legs to them, but in 2022, you would pay $170.10 for the Medicare Part B monthly payment. Now, people pay that in different ways. If they are not receiving their Social Security income, well, then people pay that through a checking account, on a credit card, or they just get a quarterly invoice and they're paying every 3 months about $510.30 because it's a quarterly invoice. Now, if somebody is receiving Social Security income, well, the $170.10 is being automatically deducted from their Social Security checks, which people forget about sometimes. So there are many people, friends and family, who say things like, I don't pay anything for Medicare. Be careful, they just forgot that they're paying the $170 out of their Social Security check. But it is the monthly payment for Medicare. All right, now that we've paid the monthly payment for Medicare, how does it work? Well, it works like any other health insurance because it's just health insurance at the end of the day. You pay a monthly payment, you get an ID card, you use that ID card, and when you use it, this is how it works. So, Medicare pays 80% of your bills. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Sometimes I have people with their little sheets of paper and they're writing things down and we're filling in the blanks. So Medicare pays 80% after I pay my Medicare medical annual deductible of $233. All right, so here's what that means in English is if Medicare is your primary insurance, then as you go to the doctors, as you have blood work done, as you would go to the specialists, you're going to have to pay the first $233 of your medical expenses. The $233 is the deductible. You give that money to the doctors or the blood work people. The money you're paying to those doctors or blood work is being applied to your deductible. And then once your $233 deductible has been met, Medicare pays 80% of the bills, which is great because 80% is the large majority, but it leaves us with a leftover 20%. And we don't want to pay an unlimited 20% of medical bills, like an unlimited 20% of a shoulder surgery or a knee replacement or things like that. Now, I want to bring up one point because there's something else that popped up here, and it pops up on people quite a bit that aren't really aware of it. So Medicare is means tested. So the more money people make in retirement or right before retirement can really dictate how much people pay for Medicare. So while everybody's going to pay the base rate of $170.10, some people who make higher incomes, they have to pay more for Medicare. And that increase is known as IRMA, IRMAA, which stands for the Income Related Monthly Adjusted Amount. And those people have to pay more for Medicare who do well financially. All right, but at the end of the day, you got to pay for Medicare. Don't believe all the crazy things that are on TV, like with Joe Namath and Jimmy Walker, how they say things are free and call some weird 800 number. Don't fall for that stuff. You still got to pay for Medicare, and then Medicare is going to pay 80% of your medical bills. All right, but the leftover 20% is no fun, and it can be a lot of money. So people come down and they buy this second ID card, which would be a Medicare Supplement plan. Now, Medicare Supplement plans are also known as Medigap plans. So if you ever hear the word Medigap or the word Medicare Supplement, that's the same thing. So they're just nicknamed. But the proper terminology is Medicare Supplement. These supplements are done by insurance companies. So like a Humana supplement or a Cigna supplement or a Aetna supplement. A lot of supplements out there, a lot of companies. They all work the same way. They're government standardized plans, and they're done by letters like Plan F or Plan G or Plan N or Plan K. In 2022, there are 12 available Medicare supplement plans. So you better understand what you're looking at, because people can get kind of confused with all of them. But when you get the right ones, well, you're going to pay a monthly fee for that insurance. The typical monthly payment for a Medicare supplement plan for somebody in the East Coast, like Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, DC, well, over here, we're normally paying around $120 a month for a Medicare supplement plan's monthly payment. Now that's around for a 65-year-old, 66-year-old, male or female. A lot of times the females will pay a little bit less than males. Yes, this is gender discrimination, but it's based on, claims, and, women typically cost a little bit less in this case for Medicare supplement plans. But on average, it's about $120, all right? Well, what do you get besides a plastic ID card? Well, the supplement plan itself, that insurance, is going to pay all of the remaining 20%. Well, that's when it becomes pretty nice, because even in Oklahoma, 20% coverage plus 80% coverage is 100% covered. So you're 100% covered to go to the hospitals you'd like to go to, the doctor you'd like to go to, the specialist you'd like to go to. If you needed an MRI, you don't have to wait for things. You just go and get it done. There's not a lot of approvals and authorizations. It's pretty nice. So if you have older friends and they say things like, well, I just had a knee replacement and I didn't pay anything. I went to physical therapy, didn't pay anything. They paid $170 a month for Medicare. They paid $120 a month for their supplement plan. They met their deductible, and now they are covered at 100%. So you got to read between the lines when people say they're not paying anything, because there's always something to pay and there's no free lunch. But one of the main issues with Medicare is Medicare itself doesn't cover any prescriptions. So because Medicare, the government, does not cover prescriptions, they came out with a program called Part D. Now the letter D stands for drugs. At least that's what I tell people it does. I don't think the government really thought all that through, but works out. So Part D is a government program, but it's administered by insurance companies. So you don't get a Medicare drug plan, you get a United Healthcare Part D drug plan, or a Cigna Part D drug plan, or a WellCare Part D drug plan, or a whatever Part D drug plan. Aetna, you name them. Now, around Virginia, in the East Coast, the average price is about $30 a month for a drug plan. Nationally, the average price right now is about $35 a month for a drug plan. Well, if it's an average, there are some drug plans that are more and some drug plans that are less. By the way, there are many drug plans in each state. Like in Virginia right now, there's 23 drug plans. In North Carolina, there's 21 drug plans. In DC, there's 21 drug plans. In Florida, there's 30 drug plans. So it just depends on the state that you're in, which plan is the right one for you. And keep in mind, you got to make sure the drug plan you get covers the prescriptions you use at the pharmacy you go to for the lowest total cost. So to find that out, you can use an expert. Otherwise, it's going to take a long time for you to call 30 different insurance companies and have them run their numbers independently. We just look at all the plans available in that particular state and then find the right drug plan for that particular person who takes those prescriptions and go to that particular pharmacy to make sure they're on the right drug plan. But anyways, so you'd have to pay about $30 a month for a drug plan. And at the end of the day, I'm going to come back to old Irma. You're still going to pay co-pays for prescriptions. And the co-pays that you would pay for your prescriptions vary depending on the drug tier and the pharmacy I go to. If you take any prescriptions right now, you understand that when you go to the pharmacy to pick them up, and whether it's a mail order pharmacy or your local pharmacy, you typically have to pay something for that particular prescription that you picked up. Now, here's an asterisk with this, is there are some drug plans that cover some drugs at 100%. These kind of prescriptions are the very low cost generic prescriptions. We're talking things like lisinopril or amlodipine or valsartan or metformin. These prescriptions are so inexpensive that the companies just basically allow you to get them 100% covered from day one. So if you have some friends who take very low cost prescriptions and they tell you things like, I don't pay anything for prescriptions, you got to read between the lines, because we get those phone calls all the time. But then it's somebody who calls us that might take insulin, or they take inhalers, or they take really expensive prescriptions like Xarelto or Eliquis or Humira, or some of these really expensive prescriptions. Not all drugs are free. You got to make sure you're getting the right drug plan. But there's copays. That's your outlay all year long. Now, what popped up again is old Irma. Remember, that's that income-related adjustment. So people who have done well financially, not only do they have to pay more for Part B, as in banana, they also have to Part D increase. So they have to pay more for their drug plan. So if you have questions about that, we'd be happy to answer those questions as well. But at the end of the day, option number one, you'd have 3 ID cards. You have your Medicare card, your supplement card, your drug plan card, and you're paying about $320 a month, kind of like a car payment, like an old car payment, I guess, used to be before inflation. But at the end of the day, it's not cheap, but you get to go where you want to go, when you want to go, for whatever you want to go for, and you're really well covered. But this is more of the expensive plans. All right, so that's how option number one works. Let's talk about option number two. Option number two is absolutely designed to save people money. So that's what it does. Usually does. Not all the time, but most of the time. So it's designed to save money, but it is not designed for freedom and flexibility. It's not designed to be easy or have a lot of choices. It's to save money. So I tell people it's much more like the bus, like the Metro Transit bus system. Well, I'll show you how that works. So you only use one ID card. So this program is called Medicare Advantage. So option two is a program called Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is a government program administered by insurance companies. So you don't just get a Medicare Advantage plan, you get a Humana Advantage plan, or a United Healthcare Advantage plan, or a Care First Advantage plan. But with an Advantage plan, you actually don't show your Medicare card when you go to the doctors, when you go to the hospital. Don't show your Medicare card. You still have to have Medicare. You're still going to be paying for Medicare, but you just won't show that card anymore. So how Medicare Advantage works is like this. While you cannot go to any doctor who takes Medicare anymore, you need to go to the doctors that are in the network. All right, well, what does that mean? Well, these insurance companies have negotiated rates. They have negotiated doctors that you can go to. Those are the network doctors. So if you went on a Humana Advantage plan, you really need to go to the Humana network of doctors. If you had a United Healthcare Advantage plan, you have to go to the United Healthcare network of doctors. And the reason kind of why I keep saying Humana and United Healthcare, it's not because they're better than anybody else or not. They're just more nationally known. in case it's around the country. But there's a lot of really good local companies all around different states that offer really good plans. But so network of doctors. All right, that's the first thing. So you can't go anywhere. The next thing is you'd have a copay for every service. Copay for every service. So what that means is this is more like pay as you go. So if you had an Advantage plan, when you would go to a primary care doctor in the network, you might pay $5, maybe pay $10. Very low copay. Well, maybe you have to go to a specialist. Well, on an Advantage plan, you're going to typically pay between $25 and $45 to go to a specialist. It's just a copay. If you go to the emergency room, an emergency room copayment is usually around $100. Well, people sometimes will go, well, what do you mean I got to pay $100 to go to the emergency? What's my insurance company paying? The rest. By the way, if you ever look at an emergency room bill, they couldn't be $5,000 or $10,000. So if you had an Advantage plan, you'd pay $100. Your insurance company would just pay the rest. You have surgery copays, MRI copays, X-ray copays, physical therapy copays. You get copays and copays and copays for every service that you get. So be aware, like when people tell you things, they have copays. Sometimes people will say they don't pay copays. Well, if they don't pay copays, that means they're not going to the doctors, because that's how this works. All right. But then there's also copays for drugs, just like before. So you'd still pay copays for prescriptions, and the copays that you'd pay would depend on the drug tier, just like we talked about earlier. The tier of drugs are a classification, a category, basically. So the higher the tier of the drug, the higher the copayment. If you take a tier 1 drug, you might only pay $1, maybe nothing, $1 or $2. If you take a tier 2 drug, you might have to pay $8 to $10. If you take a tier 3 drug, you might pay $45. If you take a tier 4 or a tier 5 drugs, you're going to be paying a fair amount of money in copays. But you also have some fairly significant conditions sometimes. All right, so how that works, go to the right doctors, pay the copays when you go, copays for prescriptions. But earlier, when I said to get an Advantage plan, you still have to pay for Medicare. Well, that's accurate. So you still have to pay the $170.10 for Medicare Part B. Medicare Part A you don't have to pay for anymore as long as you've worked for 10 years, but you still have to pay the $170 for Part B. Well, in most areas, most metropolitan areas especially, but in most states, in most areas, you would not have to pay anything per month for the Advantage plans. So around the East Coast, there's a lot of Humana Advantage plans, United Healthcare Advantage plans, ClearSpring, which is local, Optima, which is local insurance company, Care First, which is a local company. There's a lot of plans here, Advantage plans, that you wouldn't pay anything per month. Now wait a second. That's kind of weird. How can you buy a Humana plan but not have to pay Humana anything? It's not free. These plans are heavily government subsidized. So what happens is, if you go on an Advantage plan, instead of Medicare, remember Uncle Sam? Instead of Medicare paying your medical bills, like 80% of your medical bills, like they did before, Medicare gives the Advantage plan company that you chose, on average, about $1,000 a month, every month. Whether you go to the doctor or not, Medicare is going to give the Advantage plan company about $1,000. Well, then you don't have to pay for that Advantage plan. Now, there's some Advantage plans around the country that are $20 a month or $50 a month or $90 a month, but in most cases they're zero. So you don't have to pay anything for the Advantage plan. Now, if you do well financially, well, you're not getting away from the government. So the government's still going to hit you for these income-related adjustments, because even though you have an Advantage plan, you still have to pay for Part B. So you'd pay your increase for Part B if you do well financially. You'd also have to pay more for your drug plan because your Advantage plan would come with drug coverage. It would come with Part D included inside of it. So at the end of the day, it kind of works like a bus if you think about it. Think about being on the bus. If you never use the bus all month long, how much did you pay for the bus? Nothing. You didn't have to pay anything for the bus, right? But as you use the bus, you can't go anywhere you want to go. You just always have to go to the network of doctors, like the bus route. It's not a bad. There's a lot of doctors that are in the network of doctors. The doctors that you currently go to may or may not be in. You just have to check on the Advantage plans that are available in your area. But it's just like the bus route. And just like the bus, every time you would use the bus is when you'd pay a little bit of a bus fare, so to speak. It'd be like a copayment. So they're very reasonable copayments, but every time you use your Advantage plan, you have to be prepared to pay some level of copayment to medical providers and prescriptions, that kind of thing. So that's the rundown of Medicare, option 1 and option 2. But what I get questions a lot about is switching between plans. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is switching between plans. And this is a biggie, especially for most states, not all states, but the large majority of states. All right, let's talk about switching plans. I'm not telling you which one to do. This is not advice right now. If you have questions and want actual advice, give me a call. But an example, if you choose option number 1 first, right, if you go with a Medicare Supplement plan, see, in the beginning, when you're brand new to Medicare, when you're turning 65, or when you're coming off of a group health plan, you're new to Medicare. So when you're turning 65 or coming off of a group health plan, you're considered new. And when you're considered new, both options are available, option 1 or option 2. If you choose the car first, if you choose option 1, if you choose a supplement plan, fine. You get to keep your supplement plan literally the rest of your life. They have to cover you, they have to keep you. The rates typically go up a little bit every year, like everything else goes up every year. But at the end of the day, you have your car, you go where you want, when you want, for whatever you want. But you pay for that luxury. Now, sometimes people don't want that much coverage. They don't feel like they need that much coverage, or maybe they just don't want to pay that much for the coverage. Okay, here's the nice thing. If you're on a supplement plan, good news, you can always move to the Medicare Advantage plan later in life if you'd like to. So you can move from the car to the bus, okay? Or you can start on the bus. You can start on Medicare Advantage. So when you go on Medicare Advantage though, whether it's in the beginning or later, you have to understand the rule. Now there are some exceptions to the rule. I'm not going to talk about all the exceptions. I'm going to talk about the rule. And the rule is once you go on Medicare Advantage, you're pretty much never going to be coming off of Medicare Advantage. So my bad other analogy is like that old Eagles song called Hotel California. You can check in, you just can never leave. Well, that's kind of like how Medicare Advantage works. So once you go on Medicare Advantage, you're pretty much locked in. Now here's what you can do. If you find yourself on Medicare Advantage and you found out that you didn't have the right plan or you want a different plan, good news, you can change seats on the bus. That's no problem. So if you were on a Humana Advantage plan and for some reason you didn't like it, well, you can always move to the United Healthcare Advantage plan. No problem. But then you just go to the United Healthcare network of doctors and pay the United Healthcare copays. And if you didn't like Humana and you didn't like United Healthcare and you wanted to move to Aetna, okay, well then you can move to the Aetna network of doctors and pay the Aetna copays. So if you see, you can change seats on the bus, but you're still on the bus. You're still in the Medicare Advantage program. And that's what most people don't understand completely. A lot of people think they can go from a Medicare Advantage plan and then later just go down and pick up a Medicare Supplement plan. It's not how that works. It is very difficult, almost impossible sometimes, to go from a Advantage plan and get a supplement plan. So the decision that you make is going to be a very important decision. The decision you make on a supplement or the Medicare Advantage plan is going to be very important. It's also going to be very important decisions just signing up for Medicare, like I talked about at the beginning. Should you sign up in the beginning or should you not sign up in the beginning? When you're turning 65, do you need Medicare or do you not need Medicare? Well, those are the answers that we provide. That's all the things that we do. And I'm going to leave you with this. If you have any questions about Medicare in general, you have Medicare Supplement questions, you have Medicare Advantage questions, we'd be more than happy to help. Our phone numbers are here. You can find us online. The phone number in Central Virginia is 804-464-8960. Give us a call anytime. My email is brian@boomerinsuranceGroup.com. You're more than welcome to send me an email, and really appreciate the time that you spent with me today. Hopefully it was informative and you learned something, and really appreciate it. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Well, thank you, Bryan, for such an informative and fantastic session. Now we're going to transition into a little bit of Q&A. From some of you that we've had meetings with recently, you've asked some of these questions specifically. So we want to get those answers for you, but also we want to make sure we're asking questions that are going to apply to a large portion, not only of our client base, but possibly even some of your friends as well. So I'll get us kicked off here, Bryan. And the first question that I'll ask you is, for somebody who is planning to continue working past 65, what should they do with their Medicare sign-up?
So, as usual, Medicare answer requires that depends put in front of it. So that depends. So if somebody is going to continue to work and they want to be covered by their large group health plan, then as long as the company they're working for has 20 or more full-time employees, they or their spouse are not required to sign up for Medicare at all. They won't be penalized. Nobody's taking them to jail. All the things that your clients hear and from their friends and their family, they're going to get penalized. Everybody likes talking about the penalties. So again, as long as they are covered by an actively working employee and that employee's working for a company that has more than 20 full-time employees, and the 20 employees, the company might have 25 employees and 10 of them are on the group plan, and that's okay. They just have to have 20 or more full-time employees. And then that employee does not have to sign up for Medicare, and their spouse doesn't. Now, there's a caveat to that, is because as more and more of these employers are having to shift the cost to their employees, well, sometimes it's a good idea for them to come off their group plan. I mean, we just helped a client a couple months ago where, he was the employee, his wife was a little bit older than he is, and she was turning 65. Well, the human resource manager didn't mean to really mislead. They didn't really mislead, it's just they didn't give them all the information. Well, she went to the human resource people and said, hey, I'm turning 65, what do I do? And the human resource person said, well, we have 100 employees here, so you don't have to sign up for Medicare, which is true. She didn't have to sign up for Medicare. But out of each one of her husband's paychecks, it was costing the family $350 per paycheck to cover her. Well, you have $350 in 2 weeks, another $350, so you're talking basically $700 a month to cover her portion of the group plan. Yeah, you could stay on that, or you could have her, which we did, we had her come off of the group health plan, and that saved that family $700 a month, but she still needed to buy health insurance. She still needed to get Medicare insurance. So she decided to go with kind of the higher coverage. So she went with a Medicare with a supplement and a drug plan, which ended up costing them about $300 a month. Well, $300 a month versus $700 is pretty good savings.
Yeah.
But from financial advisors, what could you do with an extra $400? Well, what they ended up doing was they ended up putting the $400 that they were saving immediately back into his 401k, and because he wasn't even maxing out the match on the 401k. He was putting in an additional $400 a month, which is, what is that, almost $5,000 a year, and then his company was matching him 50 cents on every dollar. So for the exact same money that they were already spending, he gets an extra $6,000 in his retirement. Like, that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
So it just depends. And if people have questions, they need to reach out to you guys as the advisors.
What about just the general timeline, if we back up a little bit, for folks who are approaching Medicare age? I'll keep it simple with someone who's about to turn 65. Let's assume they are no longer working, right? So they don't have to sign up for Medicare, but they have a spouse, kind of a Part B to that, maybe not in the Medicare Part B sense, but just in the second part of the question, a spouse who's not 65. So you've got a husband who's going on Medicare, the wife is maybe 62.
And they're
Can you talk about
completely
that?
retired?
Yes.
Okay.
So can you talk about that process and timeline a little bit?
Yeah, because some people are very fortunate that they are able to retire prior to the age of 65. And then as they're approaching their 65th birth month, then that's really important. So let's talk about two examples. So first off, we'll go with the traditional husband is older than the wife, okay, just to be cliche and traditional, right? So with that, so the husband is turning 65, well, he's gonna be required to come over to Medicare. He's retired, he's not covered by a large group health plan, he's gonna have to sign up for Medicare Part A and Part B, and he's gonna have to get some kind of supplemental coverage, be it a supplement or an advantage plan, drug coverage, he's gonna get something, right? Well, for him, if he's not receiving Social Security income, because some of people are delaying Social Security income, well, if he's not getting Social Security income, he's going to have to manually enroll himself into Medicare Part A and Part B through the Social Security Administration, because that's where you get enrolled in Medicare, or there are customers where we help them do all that stuff, But so he would enroll in Medicare Part A and Part B, he would get supplemental coverage, and his wife would remain on that particular plan that they were currently on until she was 65 or until that plan ended. Now, if they were on Cobra coverage, like if they had quit their job a year before and they were continuing the Cobra coverage, then she would just stay on the Cobra coverage, the health insurance from their previous job, all the way up until she was 65, if she was within that range.
And what's the range, remind me the range for Cobra for a spouse who's not 65?
It's typically 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So when people separate from service, also known as quitting their job, then when they quit their job, then the job is required to offer anybody who is currently covered, even a child, to be able to continue the coverage independently. So up for 18 months. So at the bare minimum, the spouse and any covered children would be able to continue on that group plan all the way for 18 months. Now, there's another layer to Cobra called extended Cobra, and that's for people who have quit right around their 65th birth month. So some people are getting right up to almost their 65th birth month, and then they quit because their spouse can get extended Cobra. Well, when you get extended Cobra, you get an additional 18 months, which is pretty important because then that allows people to have the original 18 months plus the additional 18 months. So they get 36 months to be able to continue the Cobra covers, the covers through their job.
Okay. And the timeline you mentioned, sign up when someone's in the beginning of their birth month, is that when they need to start, or can they start earlier, either on their own or with someone like you?
So when they really are supposed to be signing up for Medicare at age 65, then the earliest they can sign up for Medicare is 3 months before their birth month. And that's kind of important because some people might be born on the 25th of the month and they go, well, I can't sign up until the 26th, like 3 months before. That's not really the case. It's 3 months prior to your birth month. You can start the process. You don't have to do it on that first of those 3 months. You could do it 2 months before your birth month or the month before your birth month. Kind of.
Is there an advantage to starting earlier than like 3 months? Does it versus 1 month?
I would say the advantage is just getting it off your plate and being done with it.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, but every month we have people who are literally just sliding in sideways trying to get it
Yeah.
done at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
You know, and then they're surprised that the government, the federal government, doesn't work real fast, which is still surprises me. But it's through the Social Security Administration that you sign up for Medicare. So some people think it's like a light switch. No, it's like an oil lantern. It takes forever just to get that thing lit at Social Security. So the better thing to do is to sign up when you're needing to, when you're supposed to, 3 months before your birth month.
Okay.
So what do you tell somebody who's come to you, they're getting ready to sign up, they are in pretty good health, so you sign them up for Medicare, Parts A and B, you get them their supplemental plan, and they say, I don't really need drug coverage, I don't take any drugs. What's your advice around a Part D plan?
You guys would be surprised at how many people don't take any prescriptions at all. I mean, sometimes they'll take a little supplement here and there, you know, like zinc or, you know, vitamin B or something like that. But there's a lot of people who are coming to us that are 65 or a little bit older and take no prescriptions. Well, the thing is, they still need to get a drug plan, okay? Now, in Virginia, and actually most of the country, the least expensive drug plan right now is about $7.10, $7.20. Well, man, I don't even know how much I paid for the cup of coffee. It was probably $3 or something crazy. So it's one of those things, don't go without drug coverage to save $7. I mean, that's kind of silly, you know. Even last night, I was teaching a class to consumers about Medicare, and a lady said, well, what if I don't want a supplement? What if I don't want drug coverage? She's like, do I have to get it? And I said, no. I mean, you can go completely uncovered. I go, matter of fact, you don't even have to get Medicare. I said, if you're going to roll the dice, roll them. You know, like, don't get Medicare, don't get insurance, don't get anything. I said, no, that's probably not the most appropriate thing for them to do. I mean, obviously, as financial advisors, you wouldn't want people to ruin their financial planning, you know, from a health challenge. So they need to get a drug plan, you know.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? And maybe you were even asked that, but so what if they delay and then they change their mind? They didn't do any of the parts or Part D specifically. Like, can you talk about kind of getting in late when they find out they need it?
Yeah, because even people in my industry, I don't know if they just don't have the passion enough to tell people, hey, get a drug plan, you know. Because truthfully, y'all, drug plans are kind of a pain in our neck to deal with. I mean, they're important for a customer, so I'm not going to be asleep at the wheel. You know, we're going to tell them how important it is. So if a customer comes to us and they never got a drug plan when they were supposed to get a drug plan, well, then we're going to get them onto a drug plan. Now, most of the time, they have to wait to get a drug plan at the end of the calendar year during the Medicare annual enrollment period. And that enrollment period is from October 15th until December the 7th. Pearl Harbor Day is the ending of the enrollment period. So somebody at the government's got a pretty terrible sense of humor for that. But so during the annual enrollment period, people can buy a drug plan or change their drug plan. All right, well, when they would enroll during that enrollment period into a drug plan, their new drug plan would start January 1st. But because they didn't get a drug plan when they were supposed to get a drug plan, the government is actually going to come in and penalize them financially every month for the rest of their life for not getting a drug plan when they were supposed to. Now, the penalty's not terrible, but it's 1% of the average cost for a drug plan for every month you went without it. So for every single month that you didn't have drug coverage when you were supposed to have drug coverage, when you do get drug coverage, then you're going to be assessed that Part D, late enrollment penalty for the rest of your life.
So if we feel like at some point we may need drug coverage, it's better to enroll early and save on the penalties and just get it out of the gate.
Well, yeah, because while the penalty is not that terrible,
Nobody likes penalties.
Nobody likes penalties, which it's funny. People will enroll into those plans just to get away from a small little penalty, and they don't realize the whole forest for the tree situation. While we get customers calling us all year long who didn't get a drug plan, and then they had some kind of medical event, and now they need an expensive prescription like Xarelto or Eliquis which are $600 a month, $500 to $600 a month. Well, thank gosh, they saved $7 a month because now they have to pay $600 a month while they could have just paid a $45 copay for Eliquis. You know, so it just get the coverage and just, I mean, your customers are fantastic because you guys plan for that, so it's easy to just say, we plan for this, that's what you need, you got it, we're good to go.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You have any? I have a couple more, but I don't want to steal the.
No, you can go next.
Okay. So speaking of penalties, so I want to talk about the Irma adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
Without going into too much detail, but we do have folks that we work with who have typically their last years before retirement tend to be their highest earning income years.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they may sell investments or rental property or whatever. And so that last year, when you look back at their income for Medicare Part B premium adjustment, it's a high year. But then once they're retired, their income may just be Social Security. So I know there's a Irma Waiver that you've taught us about over the years. Can you talk a little bit about kind of expectations around what would classify as a waiver versus what wouldn't?
And you have to be a little creative with that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about what Irma is. So Irma is IRMAA, which is the income related monthly adjusted amount. And in English, that's just basically like an income related penalty, so to speak. Now what happens is because the federal government is always 2 years behind, they're always looking at your tax return that you filed 2 years prior. It's a weird statement, but the year in the middle never matters. So here we are in 2022. Well, they're not looking at your 2021 tax return. They're looking at what you filed in 2020. So if your 2020 tax return was at a certain level, well, your 2022 Medicare rates could be affected by how high your income was. And like you said, like some of these people who are retiring, that they're at the height of their career, making the most money they've ever made. And then on top of that, sometimes they sell stuff like a rental property or sell out of, they do Roth conversions and things like that. Well, then that affects their 2022, this year's Medicare rates.
Right.
Well, there are many ways to get out of that income related adjustment or maybe even reduce it. So what happens is it's always a case by case basis. So I would always say check with your financial advisor because then you guys can check with me, and I mean you all know it too, so we can just do it. But one example is to be able to reduce that income related adjustment, they have to have these things called life-changing events. Some of those life-changing events are things like the death of a spouse, the sale of a rental property, the divorce, marriage, and also retiring. So, but not only retiring, but even reducing your work hours counts. So if you can prove to the government that I was making all this money in 2020, but my hours have been back down or I retired, so you can turn in a form to the government that says, I am not going to be making the same amount of money in 2022 that I was making in 2020 because I retired, and then the government will literally reduce your income-related penalty.
And when does that happen? I think you had mentioned before that you'll get a notification of the Irma penalty, and that's when you act. There's nothing to do in advance of that, correct?
Right. There's nothing to do in advance because you can't really do anything until you're assessed that, fee. And then once you are assessed that fee, then we can put together that package to get it reduced or eliminated altogether.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And it's an annual problem. I mean, because in 2023, they're going to be looking at your 2021 tax return. In 2024, they're going to be looking at your 2022 tax return. So people have to be aware that even in retirement, we've seen people who are like, well, my car broke down and my air conditioning all went to heck in a handbasket during the summer, so I'm going to buy a new car and get a new air conditioning unit. Well, a new car is, I don't even know, $60,000 now or something crazy, $50,000 or more. Well, so then they would need to take money out of their 401ks or their investments. Well, if they took $50,000 out of that investment and another $10,000 out of that investment for heating and air conditioning unit, that's $60,000. Well, that $60,000 might have bumped them up, but the government won't know until 2 years later. So you have to, kind of weigh and understand, maybe we can take 30 grand out this year and 30 grand out in January. They're still getting their same 60,000 that they need,
Right.
but they're not going to be hit with the income-related adjustments in a couple years from now.
Okay. So certainly proactive things that on the personal side they can do to eliminate that situation, but on the back end there are ways to maybe get out of that.
There's lots of ways to
Got
get
it.
out of it.
Okay. So I know we're running short on time, but I'm sure we could keep going with questions. Does anybody else? I'll give you the last word, but I did have one last question I wanted to ask about, if that's okay with everybody here.
Okay.
I'm sure folks out there have seen the commercials for Good RX around prescription drugs, and so I wanted to get your opinion on, supplement plan, or Part D rather, for drugs versus Good RX. Could you explain a little bit about how they work together or not, or just your experience?
Yeah. So everybody has health insurance most of the time. Okay. And even if they work for a giant company, a small company, or whether they're on Medicare insurance, insurance is just insurance.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cover what it covers, and the cost is going to be the cost when you go to pick up your prescription. This is only going to be talking about prescription drugs, right? So I'll use myself an example because of COVID, I stare at a computer screen most of my day, so now I have dry eyes. Well, even with my own personal insurance, I have to take 2 eye drops. Well, one of my eye drops is $10 with my insurance. Well, I can cover that. But my other eye drop is $160 a month for the eye drop with my insurance, by the way. Okay? But I don't want to pay $160 a month for that. So I looked it up under Good RX, which is just a website. You can look at it on your phone, you can look at it on a computer, but it's goodrx.com. And there's a lot of places that are like this now. There's Blink Health. There's a lot of these discount programs out there that are all free, by the way. But when I go to CVS to pick up my prescriptions, I file the one that's $10 underneath my insurance, and the one that is supposed to cost me $160. I tell them, don't file that underneath my insurance. We're going to use Good RX, and it brings it down to, I think it's $50 some odd.
Yeah.
So that saves me over $1,200 a year just by using Good RX instead of my insurance. Now it's an in place of, so you're not using them together. You can use Good RX, and there's many ways to reduce the cost of prescriptions.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good tip. Whether you're on Medicare or not, and you think you've referred to it as a coupon.
Yeah,
I think there's some negative connotations around coupons, but nonetheless, it saves money, and our experience has been that it can save large dollars, certainly on more expensive prescriptions. So that may be something to check out if you find yourself paying large amounts for prescriptions. So, all right, well, great. I know we could keep talking, and we've worked with Bryan for many years, and certainly if you have questions for your own personal situation, certainly reach out to us. We're happy to make a connection with Bryan or help you on our own, as we've done over the years. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and it's always good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye.